I can't do it because I got two funerals tomorrow, and yeah, but I'm meeting with family, so it'll come.
You can type it.
Oh, I can do that. Yeah, right. Thanks. We'll talk. Good. Sitting on the left side. Somebody has to represent the left. How are you doing? Might as well be you. And I'll lean in your direction. I lean left anyway. It won't be hard. I won't have to go like this. You doing okay? Yeah. Moving along on your project. I am. It's what about your friend from Switzerland? Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. You know, I'm kind of I'm kind of a symmetry guy. There's as much on the right as on the left. This bisects the room. This way, oh dear. My sense of symmetry is just totally off. Okay, very good. So if I start with the New Testament, you'll understand why. Okay, so first of all, thanks to Paul Sobel for picking up the bagel, for sponsoring the bagels, and Jackie Weiner picked the bagels up. Where's Jackie? Right there. Good. Thanks so much for doing that. Just an announcement. I'm going to be working with you on Rabbi Sachs's interpretation of some of these passages in our Torah portion today. He's got some wonderful things to say about it. But just continuing the Sachs motif, this Wednesday at 1 o'clock, I'll be doing a book review of his book, Not in God's Name, with the subtitle of Confronting Religious Violence. It's a very, very powerful book. If you can make it on Wednesday, that'd be great. If not, I encourage you to pick the book up. He's always wonderful, but here he really has a special argument about this topic. Okay, well, is that not okay? Okay, so look, I have some sad news. One of our Torah study participants and a wonderful guy, Chad Deal, passed away yesterday after a long illness. I visited him on Wednesday. He died yesterday. Was not obviously doing well. So, as we always try to do here, when one of our number passes away, we have a moment of silence just to remember him. So, let's pause and remember Chad, a wonderful person. As many of you know, Chad was something of a scholar, actually. He loved the Bible, as I've been saying to people with whom I'm having these conversations about Chad. He was the most expert person I've ever met in the biblical books of Chronicles. The end, the last, not the final end, but the last four books of the Bible. There are two of the last four. And he regularly quoted it, and he knew the differences between the Chronicles version of King David and the Samuel books on King David. And I was always impressed by it. But Chad knew a great deal about ancient Israel and about archaeology and so on. Gary?
May I say a couple of words, please?
Absolutely.
I've known Chad for more than 30 years. He came as a trainee in our rheumatology department at Case Western in the 1970s, and it was clear from the very start that he was a star. Chad went on to practice at UH for several years, developed an interest in osteoporosis, a bone disorder, and then moved over to the Cleveland Clinic, where he has had a very long practice and has specialized in the area of osteoporosis. Chad was definitely a scholar. He wrote some papers, some research and clinical papers in that field, and I want to say that it's been my pleasure and honor to have known him for all these years. He was a wonderful person, a devoted father and husband, and we will miss him very much.
Thanks so much, Gary. That's great. Arthur?
So, I don't need the slide
appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, Maida?
I'm going to change the subject slightly. I went to Rabbi Rosie's funeral.
Can you hold that just for a second? I want to say a few more things about Chad. Apropos of what Arthur just said, when Chad's grandson was preparing for his bar mitzvah, he called me and said, I'm going to do a Torah reading and a Devar Torah too. Would you help me with it? So he wrote something, and then we met, and he delivered that because he wanted his grandson to feel the involvement of the family and himself. So that was very, very moving. Every now and then, over the years, a grandparent will have his or her bar bat mitzvah with the grandchild. What we typically do is, at the reading of the Torah, bring the grandparent up, have the grandparent do an aliyah, and I would bless him and so on, or her. So it wasn't parody, it wasn't each did the same thing, but was recognizing that as well. So thanks for bringing that up. As you know, Chad and Andrea lost a son some years ago, and she is not doing well either. So if you have some connection with Andrea, the family, you might want to reach out to her. Their daughter, Alexis, is also hurting, though this family has experienced its tragedies and its losses. So our hearts reach out to them. The funeral's tomorrow at 2:30 here, and it will, I believe, be live streamed. Okay, Maida, thanks for your patience.
Yesterday was Rabbi Rosie Klein's funeral, and it was very, very amazing how positive every single thing that was said about her happiness, her joy, her sharing, her loving way of dealing with people. And I thought if she had been here, that people would want to know that she was very, very well blessed yesterday.
Yeah. I was there. It was a 2-hour funeral with 2 very long eulogies, but they did her great justice, too. She was really an amazing person. Okay, our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments, and joining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so today we have a double portion, Bahar and Bechukotai, chapters 25, 26, and 27, which end the book of Leviticus. I want to focus on Bahar, which is one chapter, chapter 25, just packed with material. I did a quick perusal. I might be wrong, but according to my perusal, there are only 3 Torah portions that are one chapter in length. And that's this one, and then Vayelech and Ha'azinu, chapters 31, Deuteronomy 31 and Deuteronomy 32. Both of those chapters bring the whole narrative of the Torah to a close with final things, a song which in poetic form traces the history of the relationship with God and between God and the people. Vayelech, chapter 31, talks about final things, enjoined to read the Torah periodically, ordained Joshua to be the successor of Moses. So the author and editor in Deuteronomy 31 and 32, there are only 2 more chapters after that, 33 and 34. The author is, in my view, not only dealing with final things, but slowing down. analogously, if I'm not mistaken, to a retard in music, where the composer slows down as he brings or she brings the music to a pause. So here I'm going to reach for something that may be excessive, but I attribute the one chapter Torah portions at the end of Deuteronomy fundamentally to the desire to slow things down and to bring it to a kind of grand end. In this sense, again, if I'm not overdoing it, Leviticus 25, our portion for today, is singular in the 5 books of Moses. And those who put Torah portions together, I want to suggest without any proof that the editors knew that this portion was fundamental and wanted us to focus on it with particular attention. So what I want to do is read some Sachs on this, his commentary on the book of Leviticus, and look at the passages as well. So for those of you who have it somewhere, I'm going to announce the pages. I'm starting on page 359. So he says here, in general, Parshat Bahar consists of a single chapter that, despite its brevity, had a transformative impact on the social structure of ancient Israel and provided a unique solution to the otherwise intractable conflict between two fundamental ideals, freedom and equality. Okay. I'm going to indulge myself and read that sentence again. Parshat Bahar consists of a single chapter that, despite its brevity, had a transformative impact on the social structure of ancient Israel and provided a unique solution to the otherwise intractable conflict between two fundamental ideals, freedom and equality. So you see here, he's reaching for something grand, that not only is it singularly important in the Bible, but it deals with fundamental concepts that any society has to deal with and the tension between them. So I read up to a colon. Here comes now some elaboration. Much of human history has illustrated the fact that you can have freedom without equality, in parentheses, laissez-faire economics, or equality without freedom, communism and socialism, but not both. The powerful insight of the Torah is that you can have both, but not at the same time. So he's introducing 3 ideas here: freedom, equality, and time. And what he's going to propose, and a part of this I think we're not going to get to, is that revolutions tend to want to reach the goal immediately. We're going to transform society overnight. The American Revolution, certainly the French Revolution, and so on. But he wants to claim this chapter in the Bible is not revolution-minded, it's evolution-minded. That these things can come together over a period of time. The powerful insight of the Torah is that you can have both, but not at the same time. Therefore, time itself has become part of the solution in the form of the 7th year, after the 7th year, and after 7 sabbatical cycles, 7 cycles of 7 years, the Jubilee in the 50th year. These become periodic corrections to the distortions of the free market. that allows some to become rich while others suffer the loss of land, home, and even freedom. Through the periodic liberation of slaves, release of debts, and restoration of ancestral lands, the Torah provides a still inspiring alternative to individualism on the one hand and collectivism on the other. Here's what I want to say about this. I'll say it in one word, this paragraph. Wow. Don't you think? Don't you think? He's really loading this chapter up in his view with meaning. Freedom, equality, time, individualism, the collective. So if the editors of the Torah, in dividing it up into 54 Torah portions, had a glimmer of what he is suggesting here, they must have said to themselves when they gathered to divvy up Leviticus, let's make 1 week only this chapter, because it's that powerful. Okay? So Sachs here, I think, is putting on our agenda something very, very huge. Let me put it another way. These are ideas that philosophers, political philosophers, have dealt with since the time of Plato. It's always been on the agenda of philosophical reflection. We do make a distinction, and I think of Leo Strauss in this regard, between reason and revelation, between philosophy and religion, which deal with two different sources of the truth. From whence comes truth? Philosophy through reason, religion through revelation. Philosophy counts on the human capacity to think things through. Revelation relativizes the human capacity and says that we really need to hear from another source, and that is from God through revelation. So what Sachs is up to here is to deal with, maybe I should put it this way, philosophical concepts through the lens of a religion of revelation. And what can revelation, what can hearing from God, according to the Bible, add to the genius of the great philosophers, especially the political philosophers, because that's what we're dealing. We're dealing with a polis. A polis is a city, is an economic and social unit in ancient Greece, from which we get the word politics. What is it that religion, that the Bible, let's say, can uniquely offer in order to deal with these issues that, Sachs doesn't say this, but I'll say it, that philosophy cannot accomplish? Because one of the things we learn from the history of philosophy is that each subsequent philosopher disagrees with the guy before him. Isn't it true? I mean, we have the empiricists, the British empiricists, Locke and Berkeley. Then we have Kant, who is dealing with empiricism, but also with the rationalist tradition of Spinoza and Descartes, Leibniz. Then Hegel comes along and says Kant, who tried a synthesis, didn't get it exactly right. Then Schopenhauer comes and says Hegel didn't get it right. And then Nietzsche comes and said nobody has gotten it right except me. That's why he calls himself Zarathustra, another kind of revelation, and so on and so on. So we might say that the history of philosophy is the history of error. Now, that's one side of it, right? The other side is each of the great philosophers has something powerful to say, but I might add, as an alternative, consider, John Locke says, my view of the social contract. Thomas Hobbes got something wrong there. So we could be Lockean, or we could be Hobbesian, right? Or we could talk about Rousseau. So it's a rich array, obviously, you know that I feel this, of great thinkers who really have a series of premises and then try to explore the power in those premises. But the next guy comes along and says, you know, I disagree with X, Y, and Z in this view. And I think Sachs wants to say that we have something of a unitary vision in the Bible. And what unifies it is Mount Sinai, which of course is when we read, we have different voices in the 5 books of Moses. But I think he wants to say here in this chapter, maybe not uniquely, we have a unitary voice. So that's the challenge of this Torah portion. So what I want to do here is look at a couple of passages that Sachs is going to focus on next. So let's open our Bibles to chapter 25. And let's read chapter 25, verses 23 and 24. 25:23. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. Capital M, and the Torah doesn't have capital letters, but mine refers to God. This is God speaking. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers resident with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide redemption for the land. If your kinsman is in straits and has to sell part of his holding, his nearest redeemer shall have this done to him or for him. Let me go back to Sachs here. What difference, he says, at the end of this chapter, or at the beginning of the next part of it, the vision of a just society set out in Parshat Bahar brings to the fore with exceptional clarity 2 instances of a fundamental principle of Judaism. Once we understand it, we will see the Torah and Judaism itself differently. It will shed new light on the creation narrative in Genesis 1. Okay, so Leviticus 25 now must allude back to the beginning of the Torah, in the beginning. It will help us understand one of the most beautiful of Jewish laws, that of making a blessing over the things we enjoy, over food, drink, beautiful sights, and so on. And it will suggest a surprising answer to the question, what difference does religious belief make to the moral life? Oh, he's going for it here, isn't he? The principle is simply this. God is the ultimate owner of the universe. What we possess, we do not own. We merely hold in trust. And there are conditions to that trust, most fundamental of which is that we must show concern for the good of all. We find this principle set out twice in Leviticus 25 in different contexts. The first has to do with the land. We've just read that. The context is the Jubilee, the 50th year, in which land that people were forced to sell because of poverty returns to its original owners. Notice what I read at the beginning was this kind of dialectic between freedom and equality. And here, what he's pointing to is that this law of the Jubilee is trying to deal with the question of equality. And that over time, given the entrepreneurial and justified desire to amass wealth and land, has to be compensated for, because by doing that, we create inequality in society. And equality has to be given its due. And so, periodically, those who have had to relinquish their land because of poverty get a chance to start afresh. And therefore, the inequities are balanced periodically. So, I'm going to start again. The first has to do with land. The context is the Jubilee, the 50th year in which land that people were forced to sell because of poverty returns to its original owners. This raises the obvious question: how can a valid sale, how can a valid sale, in other words, the person gave up his land validly, be revoked at some later stage? The Torah gives the following answer, quoting Leviticus 25, verse 20 through 24. The land may not be sold permanently because, and here's the justification, the land is mine. You are strangers and temporary residents, as far as I'm concerned. Therefore, there shall be a time of redemption for all your hereditary lands. Okay? So, since God is the owner and the sole owner, we don't fully or truly own what we have. They're borrowed. We are allowed to use them, but let's not get a big head about it. These are things that can be taken back from us when the owner desires it. And the owner has said, periodically you have to do this. Because the land of Israel belongs to God, there can be no permanent freehold. God grants the Israelites possession of it on certain conditions, one of which is that the original owner can buy it back for a fair price at any time he has the money and wishes to do so. The other is that in any case, if the owner who has alienated himself from his land doesn't during these 50 years have the money to buy it back, in any case, that's what that refers to. The others is that in any case, it returns to the original owner in the Jubilee year. I've sold you my land, my ancestral land. I'm trying to save to buy it back. I do. I get enough money, I buy it back in the 11th year. But I've tried and tried and tried, and 50 years later, I haven't succeeded. Automatically, I get my land back. Why? Because I have to recognize that it's not my land ultimately. It's God's land. And we are tenants. And therefore, there are rules about what it means to be a tenant. And so we have to make this move from the inequity of wealth that has developed over time. I mean, we know that capital begets more capital. And so those with capital are likely to improve their lot, whereas those without it are likely not to. And what inevitably happens, inequality, as a result of that other topic, freedom, because a society wants to give people the freedom to utilize their imaginations, their capacities to do well for themselves. But inequality is likely to happen. And at a certain period, we get to go back to zero. So, because the land of Israel belongs to God, don't you see what he's trying to do here is, among other things, to say that the Bible has a set of premises which create a unique social order. And without the Bible's premises, one of which is there is a God who owns everything. Who do I think owns my stuff? Me. Why do I think so? God is a rumor. You could believe in it, but I'm not sure God exists. And therefore, what am I going to make of the claim that God owns the land? The claim he's making is that God provides the necessary condition. You better believe it. Because not only is this a matter of faith, this is a matter of morality. This is a matter of the social welfare. So the kinds of things that people like Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau and so on are trying to work on are all based on premises. I mean, after all, what does Locke say? Locke says that classical traditions focus on obligation. I'm going to try to make a case for rights. I mean, that is really one of the fundamental moves in the modern era, that we have inalienable rights. And therefore, but you could deny that. You could say basically we've overdone rights and underdone obligation or something like that. But if we start with the biblical premise, which is Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, aside from the beginning, is the premise, the fundamental premise for the creation of a just society. He's making a case for belief in God here, isn't he? For the power of religion, which is not just the opiate of the people. It's really the foundation of a society that's going to feature two things in conflict: freedom and equality. Because the land of Israel belongs to God, there can be no permanent freehold. God grants the Israelites possession of it on certain conditions, one of which is the original owner can buy it back for a fair price any time he has the money and wishes to do so. That's contingency. Do you have it or not? Contingent on your circumstances. We have to move to eliminate contingency and deal with necessity. The other option is that in any case it returns to the original owner in the Jubilee year. If society doesn't allow you to buy it back along the way, your own choice is irrelevant when it comes to the 50th year. It has to happen. The second example has to do with the treatment of Israelites forced to sell themselves into servitude. Again, economic necessity. These things happen. They are not to be treated as slaves, but rather as hired workers or temporary hands. Nor should they be treated ruthlessly in a way that breaks their spirit. And they must go free in the Jubilee year. Explaining why, the Torah twice invokes the principle that Israelites are first and foremost God's servants. I've hired them, but whose servants are they really? Of the real owner. And the real owner has a right to say how long their servitude has to be. Therefore, no Israelite may enslave a fellow Israelite. And here he quotes two passages from Leviticus 25. Verse 42, because the Israelites are my servants, Sachs italicizes that phrase, because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. Why are they servants of God? Because God freed them, and they owe God a certain fealty. They must not be sold as slaves. Second passage from verse 55. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. I, the Lord, am your God. Okay? So, Leviticus 25 now in Sachs's hands alludes to two foundations, unsurprisingly. The creation story and the Exodus story. And what's the Rosenzweig's triad? Creation, revelation, redemption. And if you look at the star, what's the name of that book? The Star of Redemption? Star of Redemption. What do we have here? We have two foundations and an implication. Creation, revelation leads to redemption. Because Leviticus 25 is all about redemption. But not big capital R redemption, the Messiah will come. But small kinds of redemption where people are released, given their inherent dignity, from what has happened contingently to them because of the unequal distribution of resources, which a society wants to promote, but has to reckon with the consequences. So Rosenzweig's star, creation, revelation, redemption, if you think just for a moment about the structure of the prayer book. So there are 4 parts to a basic service. Let's see if I can get them. Preliminaries, the Shema and its blessings, the Amida, and on your way out the door. You're returning to society, the Aleinu, the Kaddish, and so on. The structure of the Shema and its blessings, with the Shema and the V'ahavta in the middle, is surrounded by 3 blessings, 2 before the Shema and 1 after. The first one is about creation, Mariv Aravim, who brings on the evening. The second is about revelation, or Genesis and Exodus, the basic concept in each. You gave us Torah, thank you so much. You gave it to us because you loved us. No, it doesn't say you loved us. It says you love. Ohev Amo Yisrael. Then we get the Shema and the V'ahavta. Thank you for creating the world. Thank you for giving us this gift of Torah. You are one. And we shall love you with all our heart and all our soul and all our might. Then comes the third blessing, redemption. So that the order in which Sachs is discussing this, 2 fundamental texts, Genesis 1 and Exodus 20, creation and revelation, give us the wherewithal to produce redemption. Small r here, of individuals and land periodically. Okay? God redeemed us. We redeem each other. A 1-word response to this. Wow. I mean, really, don't you think? On what are these 2 statements? Because, I'm going to read them again. Because the Israelites are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. I'm God, you're not. I created the world in which you live, the orderly world. You don't have to worry about, will there be nighttime tonight? I promise you that night and day will work in an inevitable cycle. So you can go to bed at night and recognize that the sun's coming up tomorrow. So get your rest, because tomorrow will come and you can do your thing. That's what I promised you at the beginning. Because the Israelites are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold to slaves. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. I redeemed them, and the Redeemer who created freedom owns them, and therefore can say what God wants us to do. On what are these 2 statements, God's ownership of the land and his prior claim to the service of the Israelites, based? The answer to the second question is that God redeemed the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Geula, redemption, is a legal as well as a religious term. It means buy back, B-U-Y, buy back, to redeem. God bought us back from slavery. We have to buy back our fellow citizens from servitude. Thus God, redeeming the Israelites, became in legal terms their owner. That is the meaning of one of the phrases in the song the Israelites sang at the Red Sea, Exodus 15, verse 16. Until your people pass by, Lord, until the people you acquired, kanita, pass by. The passage of the Israelites through the sea is construed here as emphasized by Sachs, a legal act of acquisition. Oh, isn't that great? Our ancestors got redeemed from Egypt. Wow, how, God, so romantic. It's just, wow, we had freedom. No, this is a legal act of acquisition. And a legal act leads to obligations. So the passage of the Israelites through the sea is construed here as a legal act, kanita. You purchased us, you bought us on the part of God. The people passed from Egypt, the domain of Pharaoh, to the desert, and thus into the domain of God. On what specific legal basis does God own Israel, the land of Israel? To answer this, we have to go back to Genesis 1, the biblical account of creation. This has been understood throughout the ages as one of three things. Some read it as a historical narrative, an answer to the question, what happened? Others read it as a kind of early proto-scientific account, an answer to the question, how did it happen? How did the universe come into being? Yet others have understood it as a philosophical statement about the relationship of God to the universe. God is the first cause, the prime mover, the necessity that underlies our contingency, the eternity that frames our existence in time. We are because He is. Don't you love that? We are because He is. However, Sachs goes on to say, these are all misreadings of the creation narrative. We know this because of the name of the book. Torah means not history or science or philosophy, but law in the widest sense of the word. God gave us Hukim and Mishpatim and Torot. Torah's fundamental meaning is law. The Torah is primarily a legal and moral text. Wow. I thought it was a religious text. It is, but not here. Here he's going for something else. It is an answer to the question, how shall we live? Genesis 1 is first and foremost a foundational statement about law itself. It is a jurisprudential text. That is, it sets out the basis of divine authority. God's right to issue the laws and commands that are the principal bases of human existence. It is there to provide an answer. I remember what Rabbi Block said once, not to embarrass you, Candy, at all. When somebody's phone rang in the middle of a service, and without pausing, he said, that better be from God. Hey, and if it is, we'll pause. Put him on speaker, right. And? Yeah, that's right.
So everyone for sure.
That's true. No, he was great with those one-liners. Okay, so let me just go back to the beginning of this paragraph because I think it's so rich. However, all these are misreadings of the creation narrative. Know this because the name of the book, in other words, he could have said, well, I think of it as a legal text. But he goes to some piece of evidence. What is this book named? It's named Torah. And Torah has many meanings, one of which is law. So Torah means not history or science or philosophy, but law in the widest sense of the word. The Torah is primarily a legal and moral text. It's an answer to the question, how shall we live? Genesis 1 is first and foremost a foundational statement about law itself. It is a jurisprudential text. That is, it sets out the basis of divine authority.
God's right to issue the laws and commands that are the principled bases of human existence. It is there to provide an answer to the fundamental question of any legal system. By what authority does a legislator legislate? What is the source and justification of sovereignty? By what right does X rule over Y? You see, he's answered those questions from the text itself. God created the universe. What the Creator creates, the Creator owns. I write a sermon. Whose sermon is it? It's mine. If you want to plagiarize it, I can say to you, well, that is mine. I get to control what's if the artist does something magnificent, that's the artist's. Okay? God created the universe. Who else owns it, and therefore who else can say what is done with it and within it? By what is so? It is there, Genesis 1, to provide an answer to the fundamental question of any legal system. By what authority does a legislator legislate? What is the source and justification of sovereignty? By what right does X rule over Y? There's a principle in Jewish law, I got ahead of myself here, that states that a craftsman acquires title to a work he has created. The same principle that, for example, underlies the idea of intellectual copyright. We own what we create. That's the point of Genesis 1. Do you think of Genesis 1 as laying down the foundations for law and how we are obligated to treat one another? Given the realism of a complex society in which inequality, given the importance of freedom, is bound to happen. We got back to Genesis 1 to deal with this question. We own what we create. That's the point of Genesis 1. God created the world. Therefore, he owns the world. Therefore, he can lay down conditions under which he allows others to live there. This is not a historical, scientific, or philosophical point, but a legal one, and it applies generally, not just in the case of God or Judaism. It arises, for example, in the context of the rule attributed in the 3rd century Talmud text known as Dina de Malchuta Dina, the law of the land is the law. As exiles in lands not their own, under a legal and political order they did not initiate, Jews nonetheless accept the authority of the law of the land. The Talmud states this as a rule, and in the Middle Ages the commentators ask, what is its basis? And so on. So he continues with this. The Torah opens with a creation narrative to establish the principle of eminent domain. Okay? So eminent domain is that a state has a right to take for its own use, and there are restrictions that the law has developed. The state can take, think of the way in which neighborhoods have been torn asunder by superhighways going through them. But that's eminent domain, which has to satisfy 2 conditions, as I understand it. One, it has to be for public and not private use, and the other, the ones from whom it is taken have to be compensated. But the owner has a right by eminent domain to serve the public good. The Torah opens with a creation narrative to establish the principle of eminent domain as the legal relationship between God and the universe. This is remarkable. What it tells us is that God rules by right, not by might. Even though God is the force of forces, who turns the sea into dry land, sends bread from heaven and water from the rock, talk about power. He rules not as a tyrant by virtue of power, but as a constitutional monarch answerable to the claims of righteousness and justice. Think of Abraham in chapter 18 challenging of God. Shall the just one, when he talks to God, not do justice? In other words, Abraham knows or assumes that God and justice are inextricably bound together. Abraham is presuming God's essence, justice and righteousness. You have to act that way. How dare you then say you're going to kill the just and the unjust? That's that Promethean moment, right, when he storms the heavens. But not like Prometheus in ancient Greece to undermine the heavens, but to remind God who he is. This is an acceptance of God and God's power in a way that Abraham fears God has forgotten. So, God rules not by virtue of, as a tyrant by virtue of power, but as a constitutional monarch answering to the claims of righteousness and justice, quoting Genesis 18, the ways of the Lord. That is both a revelation and a revolution. It represents the first and most systematic attempt in the history of human thought to ethicize ethics, to ethicize the universe and all that is therein. The Torah lives with the fact that in its time and in ours, this is not how politics is normally constructed or society shaped. They're usually the result of the distribution of power, political, military, or economic. Hence the decision of God after the flood and the Tower of Babel to reveal his sovereignty through one people, a people who completely lacked any political, military, and economic power of their own, namely the Israelites. We came into being without the accoutrements of political power. Therefore, we know what it's like not to have it. What Leviticus 25 makes clear is that God's sovereignty over Israel, the people in the land, is rooted in the principle of eminent domain. God's ultimate ownership of both is the basis of the biblical vision of the just society. One word. Seriously. I mean, isn't it true? Arthur?
So this is really helpful. It helps me think about a real challenge, which is religion really inspires towards ultimate justice in society, but doesn't realize it, because you think about, I mean, it's funny to me that he pins so much on the Jubilee and the sabbatical year, because you think about the peak of Jewish political power. King David's dynasty was a peak of the United States. State of Israel is a peak in Jewish history of political power. In neither example, as far as I know, certainly not in the modern one, do we have the practice of the Jubilee. In other words, I don't know of, in the Torah, of King David or Solomon actually practicing, and David wrote out the Torah, and yet the prophet Nathan next to him. So it wasn't as though he was unaware of these things. So the question is, if Sachs is using this as the ultimate example of the power of religion to realize the just society, the Jubilee year, and it wasn't practiced, what does that say about religion's limits in realizing its ideals?
Yeah, so Arthur is raising the question of if this is the ideal, how come it was really never practiced in the land of Israel? Do you want to respond to that, Steve?
Yes.
Good.
In one small way, in Israel, there is not, by private hands, complete ownership. You can buy something, but it's really a 99-year lease. It reverts after that.
Right.
So one element of the idea of release in the Jubilee is still in Israel's legal structure.
Is it in its, does it implement it?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah.
No, but does someone lose their land and revert?
Wait, hold on. So my,
If you start something after 99 years, it reverts.
it reverts back. Has it really been implemented, or is it just on the books? It has been. Yeah. Who wants to say something about that?
That's our lease
Am I? It's leased.
in the old University Circle building. It's for 99 years.
Okay, very good. Yes, it's true.
Yeah, lawyer.
Right, somebody asked me, by the way, the building we gave to Case is a 99-year lease, and somebody said to me, what's going to happen in the 99th year? What is going to happen? And Rick Block, again, kind of a leitmotif of this morning, said, ask Roger will be there. That's why I practice every single day. Lou?
Well, Rabbi Sachs is waxing very eloquently about this here. When it came to, the part of doing this chapter here, was there any rabbinical response or sermon? I mean, this is like, very theoretical and very philosophical. Rabbi Sachs is a rabbi, and, he's supposed to reflect on what's actually going, what goes on, rabbis implore their congregation to give tzedakah, because it's one of the 613 good deeds,
Uh-huh.
to follow the good deeds.
Yeah.
Following the Jubilee is another one of these here that he ever said to speak, because I can understand, like, you talk about, servitude, indenture servitude, that's something that actually was used in England. I don't know about other countries, but certainly, people could sell themselves into servitude, pay off the debt and stuff like that. Is he all talk and no action or something like that? Rabbis are supposed to, sermonize about, and implore their congregations to follow the Torah.
Yeah. So this is like asking a second baseman, why don't you play left field? I mean, there are different roles in a game and in society. And he's exhorting, he's trying to clarify, and he's trying to demonstrate to those who may be able to implement some of these things that, here's a fundamental worldview here that has great power. I'm trying to appeal to you to see how potent it is. By the way, he didn't have to write this for the prophets, biblical prophets or modern day prophets who are trying by definition to realize the elements of a good society. So there are those who are taking this, maybe not in these elegant terms, but are trying to take the real and have it lifted to the ideal to the degree that it can. We know that human nature is obdurate and doesn't always yield to the right way.
As an aside, there's a group in southern Mexico that believes that has an equality built into their society, such that every year the richest person, the richest family of the community is supposed to bankrupt themselves by giving a party that uses up all their resources. So they go from the richest to the poorest. So one family each year converts from one to the other.
Okay.
And,
I didn't know that, but this is an example of trying to implement a just society over against inequalities. Larry?
And it turns out that they're very successful.
Okay, good, great. Well, I think it's a good example that elements of society, larger or smaller, do try to implement this from time to time. Larry?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier about Marx and religion being an opiate.
Yeah.
And this certainly does not sound like that. Maybe there's other parts in Judaism that do sound like that. And I'm just wondering if you know, like, where did he get the thought for that statement? Was it more from from Tanakh, or was it more from the New Testament? Was it from the Quran or some other?
What statement?
Opiate, religion is an opiate.
Oh, I think it's just it's a dramatic expression of an idea that is always current. I mean, the prophets are that way too. Amos talks about people with means enjoying their means and ignoring the poor as if they're drunk on their power and really don't have the insight to step back and to see the larger good. Yeah. But the opiate of the people idea is as old as Spinoza. I mean, Spinoza wants to argue that the big culprits here is not religion per se, but the clerics, who with grandeur and fancy robes and all kinds of things display their power, and their power to control the people. Some of the elements are which, if you don't do the right thing, you're going to have a really tough time in the afterlife. And I have the wherewithal through which you can avoid such a dire fate. And all the rich, right, believe in the saving power of Jesus. Perform the mitzvot. The more mitzvot, the more goodness you'll have in the world to come. I mean, I think that it's a very interesting critique on his part. Of course, what Spinoza's trying to do is to dilute the opiate so that people are no longer beholden to the church for its salvation, and a society can begin to engage in free speech, and through free speech to correct its ailments. That's what's his idea, to eviscerate the power of the church. I mean, Spinoza was a religious person. Novalis, the poet Novalis, the Romantic poet, said that Spinoza was a God-intoxicated person. He wasn't opposed to religion. Now, he was a pantheist. He didn't agree with the double-decker universe, so to speak, because his famous dictum was, God equals nature. The more scientific knowledge you have, the closer to God you are. If God represents full knowledge, why not get it in an authentic way? How the stove works. If you don't want to be punished by touching a stove whose power you don't understand, learn how a stove works. And therefore you will be saved in very temporal terms. Yes, Dietz.
Lou mentioned England. In England, there are common law courts that decide issues. There are also a separate institution, equity courts, that can overrule common law courts. So there's kind of
Checks and balances or
yes.
review. Nice, judicial review. Sure, that's a good example. So societies have the power of implementing to some degree what he's talking about, to deal with the weak and give them some rights and lean in their direction, just the way the biblical prophets did. The biblical prophets are really the descendants of this worldview, aren't they? Knowing that God is legislator, he redeemed the people, we're beholden to God, and you follow the blueprint of Torah, you're going to live a righteous life, if only society would do it. Jim?
Well, I find it interesting, the 50-year parameter.
Yeah.
Because if you step back and it says he shall redeem his property or whatever, what are the odds that person is going to be around? And so to me it implies not so much the redemption of the land and that you don't own it, but your life cycle itself. I mean, you can walk around all arrogant that you're in charge of everything. And as we've seen in the last few days,
I see what you're saying.
you're gone all together. So, to me, it emphasizes very subtly who's in charge. Deny it if you want to, but you can't, well, you can, but it doesn't work.
Oh, I think that's a very elegant comment. Jim's point here is that the 50-year interval makes this law, to some significant degree, impractical. You know, I sell my land to somebody. Okay, well, I'm going to try to find a way to buy it back. And if I can't, all I need to do is wait 50 years. If I'm already 42, So you're pointing out that, in a way, implementation is less than fully practical, and you've moved to what is the view of life implicit there, that we, whether or not this is actually implemented, we should realize that we're fundamentally not owners, but rentors. And this would create a sense of humility and a recognition of the fragileness of life. I like that point, because in a certain way, one of the problems in this argument is 50 years is an awfully long time. And how is it going to happen in every case? Probably can't. So I think that you have a really good insight into what this is fundamentally about. Steve?
I want to push back a little bit on the lack of practicality.
Good.
If these laws were the basis of commercial law for the Israelites, and they would say, basically, there is no freehold transition of property, and you can only have a lease, then the price of the lease would reflect the amount of years until the Jubilee. And so, in practical matters, if you were to sell the property for $100 under a lease agreement, you'd only get $50 out of it. They're just, in some ways, they're imposing this kind of permanent transfer can't happen. It all has to happen in a lease, and from an economic standpoint, they would just adjust the value of the lease based on how many years.
How many years?
And there is mention of in the Torah.
Absolutely.
So, I can lease the land. My children would get the land back. It's not such a bad thing. I get the money up front for the lease to pay off my debts or whatever dire straits I'm in, and my children will inherit.
Okay, so you're making a good point here, that this is not an all or nothing idea, that you sell it and 50 years later you can get it back. There are things happening along the way in terms of the value and so on of the land and the children. So that's very good. I like Jim's point here about a worldview, but you've also restored the practical. It's possible.
It's not clear that this was ever implemented, but
There certainly have been attempts, and as somebody pointed out in Israel today, you're a rentor, a leaseor. But I think that certain rabbinic groups have tried to impose this on the land. But of course, in a democratic society and so on, it's hard to mount a theocracy. That's what this would take, the rulership of the public affairs, not just religious affairs, by the clerics. Scott?
So to sort of tie together Arthur's insinuation, well, I don't know if insinuation may be a strong word, but and Lou's as well, about the apparent hypocrisy of us saying this is something we ought to do, and we never did. I think I read some commentary somewhere, and I can't tell you, somewhere between Rashi and Sachs.
Okay, very good.
We weren't obligated to do that after the exiles.
Aha.
The diaspora came into existence because the original owner made the available. It was one thing. There was one other thing, this is sort of a facetious one. You used the word rent. So in a sense, when we left Egypt, what we left with, the wealth that we left with was sort of our renter's deposit there, right?
Yeah, that's good. I like your point about the exile. I think that is right, that these laws, the laws that relate to the land of Israel, are suspended in the diaspora. Am I right about this or wrong? You think I'm right. So that all the more so when the Zionists, especially the religious Zionists, began to populate the land, one of their ideas was, let's restore all of those laws which were dependent on the land. This is part of the redemption of the Jewish people. We get to be full Jews again and observe all of our laws suspended in the diaspora. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's true. That's an interesting point. David?
I have a philosophical comment. You began this discussion by talking about hogs and lots.
Mm-hmm.
And different. This is a very attractive view of how to make a just society, and I like it a lot. But thinking about it philosophically, this is a case that's being made by saying, well, we're right and everybody else is wrong because this comes from God. And that is kind of unfair to other philosophical traditions. You know, other philosophers have to say, well, based on principles that I'm arguing, this is the right way to do things. And so this is giving the Torah somehow an unfair advantage. So with that in mind, I want to comment that this system isn't perfect either. Because saying that in 50 years there will be a jubilee and everybody will be restored to their property assumes that everybody has property. But a lot of people don't have property. And so over this 50 years, justice isn't served on them.
Yeah.
And that's why we have people like John Locke who are saying everybody has a right, not just the people who happen to be landowners.
Gee, I think those are two great comments, really. Thank you for restoring the dignity of philosophy. I like that very much because it's true. This is narrowly focused, powerfully but narrowly. Whereas Locke and so on, Hobbes, I mean, the philosophers are trying for universal principles and methods. So that's very, very good. The issue of whether or not the Torah is given a break here or that it suggests that everything else isn't good. You've already given a good example why one can't make that claim that everything else is nonsense or inadequate. I don't know that that's Sachs's argument. I don't think he's denigrating the non-religious. What he's doing is elevating, trying to elevate, show the power of the Torah, which, as you point out, to some degree is narrow and limited. Yeah. I mean, in a certain way, think of it this way. Maybe you'll not agree with this. Take any axiomatic system like Euclidean geometry, which is going to start with premises, definitions, and let's see what we can build. And the more we can build, the stronger the claim that this is really powerful, unique, right? And this is, in a way, an axiomatic system. We have our fundamental texts, which are our axioms, Genesis 1, Exodus 20. Let's see what we can build from that, is what Sachs thinks Leviticus 25 and other texts are trying to do. So I'm not sure that he's making a uniqueness claim. In a certain way, he's starting already inside the circle and trying to show the power of this way of living. But I think he would say, to David's point, it's true. I'm assuming Genesis 1, and Exodus 20, Exodus 15, as giving us the premises that generate the power of a just society.
I agree completely.
Yeah. But I wonder, just to speculate here, what about the casual observer, the person that thinks the Bible has nothing to offer, and that religion is, as Marx said, an opiate, and it tries to drug us? And let's suppose that person who has a strong view is nevertheless open to an argument. If we said to that person, read these pages and see what you think. Now, who knows what that person will say? But I think that Sachs wants to say, once you jump on the circle, are you willing to jump on the circle to see what the entity has? Let's do a thought experiment. Let's read the Bible sympathetically. Is it a powerful system? I think the casual, unbiased observer would say, you know what, I do see power there. It's not my power, but I see it. Don't you think Sachs has shown there is inherent power in that structure? For those for whom? Vivian?
I think we're forgetting where all this started, which is the land is God's, the people are going into the land, and God is dividing it up by tribes.
Yeah.
So we start out equal. The tribes get this land and they divide it up among their people. So everybody starts out with something. It's not that we're all starting out unequal.
Yeah. So Vivian's point is that if you look at the data in the text, that the land is given by God and the people divide it up and everybody has a piece of land and so on. So it starts out with, and then society and economics begins to do its work of unequalizing, which then has to be brought back to time T, to the, Candy.
It's not always equal, though, even though God gave people the land and the land was divided up, because you have to play the hand you're dealt. And why does somebody get a piece of land next to a river and somebody else gets a piece of land next to a sand dune? And so equality doesn't exist in that way, and it's not so simple.
I like that. There's going to be fundamental inequalities. When I owned a house, the grass wasn't growing. I had trouble growing the grass. And I should have said, hey, I thought you said here that I was going to flourish a little bit. So you're pointing out now down into the details that there are inequalities everywhere. Here's my response to this. See if you buy it. This is a utopian vision. It's trying to give us the big picture. And what's the power of the big picture? Hey, I know there are a lot of problems, but like anything else, if you embrace a big picture, you're going to be committed in some way or another to its implementation, and you'll run into some problems. But depending on how powerful the big picture is, yeah,
So
you need.
enough, you mean it'll rain a lot and you'll be successful, it won't matter.
In a way, it's. Let me make an example here. The rule book of baseball. Okay, so let's take the issue of a double play. Guy on first, the ball's hit to the second baseman. He pivots and throws to the shortstop, who then throws to first base. Double play. Here's the question. Does the shortstop have to touch second base? And the answer is yes, according to the rules, no, according to custom. Because if the shortstop in this situation touches second base when that runner from first is going to plow into him, there can be a lot of physical harm happening. So the convention is what we call a neighborhood play. That if the shortstop is in the neighborhood of second base, he doesn't have to touch it. In other words, the rule book, the Torah of baseball, maybe I should say the Torah is the rule book of Judaism, is the baseball book of Judaism. Recognizes problems with the Torah, with the laws, and makes adjustments because it does recognize that. That's a very good example of it. The last play of the last World Series where the guy on third slid into home. Remember that? If he had run through home, Toronto would have won the World Series. Why did he slide? For a variety of reasons. One reason is that's the custom. When you're trying to make it to home, you slide because it makes the object for tagging much smaller, and you can get in there before the. But it cost them the World Series. because the thing he should have known, and the third base coach should have known, that's a flaw in the way in which the game is played. And when the bases are loaded, you don't slide. You do slide if the bases aren't loaded, because you need to be tagged. But if they're loaded, all you need to do is touch the base, and it's quicker to home by running than by sliding. So you have to recognize the problems in the system and make an adjustment. Russell?
So the discussion brought up for me from a post-diaspora perspective on the kibbutz. So when people return to the land, again, a utopian society, and was this just socialism and Zionism from a secular perspective, or was there also religious incentive to form the kibbutz?
Well, I don't know for sure. There were secular kibbutzim and religious kibbutzim, is that right? And I'm sure the religious kibbutzim made an effort, thinking that Torah is constitution, to implement it. But I don't know to what degree different religious kibbutzim actually tried, and how hard they tried, and what. Anybody know? It's an interesting question. I mean, the socialists, the secular kibbutzim, maybe they thought of it as really powerful social legislation, even though they didn't accept its premises, as worth trying to implement. Equality, dignity, and so on. Mike?
What a great discussion, by the way. I'm trying to edit what I want to say. I have two things to say, but then you brought up the baseball analogy. So first I have to say, what about thinking of the neighborhood rule as a delegation of the rule to the umpire? Because whether the shortstop has to step on second or not is really not the issue. The question is whether the umpire says that he touched second.
And the neighborhood rule is functioning because the umpire agrees. The umpire could have said, wait a minute, you didn't touch second base. Let's look at the rule book. You have to touch second base.
But the effect is the same whether he says, I'm invoking the neighborhood rule, or he says, as far as I'm concerned, you touched second base. It doesn't matter, right? So
it's a fiction. It's a fiction.
Second point in sports also is, I think, one incarnation of the Jubilee principle is the NFL personal seat license. So you buy rights to a seat for some fixed period of time, and then each year you buy the ticket. But you can only do that as long as the personal seat license is valid, and it has a fixed period of time. So, and then the third thing, so I'm asking this without any standing because I haven't read it yet, but you mentioned a bunch of philosophers, but not Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments, which is, I think, his own counter-argument to the Wealth of Nations.
Yes.
Right?
His own argument against his own book?
Well, it's not against it. It's two sides of the scale.
Okay.
I think is the way to say it. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, no, I don't. Okay. I mean, no. Well, I do know that he has a view, and so did David Hume, I think, the Scottish school, so to speak, of moral sentiments, sympathy and antipathy, dictate obligation or felt obligation. I don't know. I don't know.
All right, we'll take that up later.
Well, we have to get to it by next week. I thought I saw another hand. Dietz?
About the 49 years, in banking, there's a 7.2% rule. With compound interest, if you take out a loan at 7.2% interest rate, in 49 years, the principal will be completely exhausted.
It will be, if you take that money out, not interest. At 7, I see what you're saying.
7.2%, your principal will disappear in 49 years.
And anything lower than that, sooner.
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay. I didn't see that in Leviticus. It's there, though. That's the thing. You got to read between the lines. I had a Talmud professor in rabbinical school who asked us one morning, "Did you do the assignment last night?" Yes, we did. Did you read the white spaces between the words? That's great. Okay. How about let's do a little Torah? Okay, so chapter 25. Let's read a little bit, then we'll stop. So the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Remember, in a way, they're still at Mount Sinai. They haven't left yet until Numbers chapter 10 and 11. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of the Lord. So the land gets to rest. An expansion of the idea of Shabbat. What's interesting here is the author is pulling out implications in this potent idea of Shabbat. You shall not, middle of verse 4, you shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. You, your male and female slaves, the hired and the bound laborers who live with you. And your cattle and the beasts in your land may eat all its yield. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement. You shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release. See, now this is very interesting. In my text, if you have a Jewish publication, there's a footnote here. It says others' liberty. But this is on the Liberty Bell, right? You shall proclaim liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants. But the translation suggests that it's not really liberty, it's release from bondage, which is a kind of liberty, but liberty is more potent than release. But you can see release also is that idea of redemption. You're redeemed. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, a yovel. Each of you shall return to his holding, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines. So this makes 2 consecutive years like this, doesn't it? The 49th year and the 50th year. I'm sure the rabbis deal with this. I mean, what are we supposed to do? That seems very impractical. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy from any of your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee. This is what, David, you were working on here a little bit. Or was it Steve? Yeah. And in selling to you, he shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. Yeah. The more such years, the higher the price. The fewer such years, the lower the price. For what he is selling you is a number of harvests. Don't wrong one another, but fear your God, for I, the Lord, am your God. Now we see the power of this, you shall fear God. Now, fear is one meaning of yirah. The other is respect. Give weight to So this is an invocation of the system that we laid out with Sachs, right? God's involved in this, and you shall recognize the ultimate justification for this because God owns you, because he redeemed you. I thought I had Maya.
It's almost like a return to Eden.
Yeah. Well, in a way, utopian. Yeah, utopia means in the etymology is nowhere. Erewhon, who was the guy who wrote Erewhon? somebody had an author. But Erewhon is nowhere backwards. Okay, so I think we should stop here. Powerful idea. But next week, the book of Numbers. Hey, we haven't finished the book. Let's quickly read the last verse, and then we'll say Chazak. When we finish a book of Torah, we gird one another up. So, the very last one, chapter 27, verse 34. Elah ha-mitzvot asher tziva Adonai et Moshe v'et bnei Yisrael b'har Sinai. These are the commandments that the Lord gave to Moses for the Israelite people on Mount Sinai. And we say to each other, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek. Let us be strong and let us strengthen one another. And as the rabbis say at a siyum to the Torah, we shall return to you.
What does the last sentence says here?
Right, so finished is the Tehillah, the psalm, for God, the Creator, Borei Olam. So it's kind of an invocation of God's power. Finished and completed, Tehillah. Tehillah is glory. Tehillim are psalms, praises is the prayer. Okay, I see what you're saying. Finished and completed is the praiseworthiness of God, the creator of the world. Love it. Shabbat Shalom. You know, I don't know the answer to that.
You think they would? It's so specific.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes, it's true. We could look it up.
Yeah, I'll ask Siri.
Ask Siri, and is Siri Jewish? Is Siri Jewish?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Siri's everything.
Yeah, she is.
When you find out, let me know.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the phone.
Oh, don't be sorry.
I forgot to turn my phone off.
I
this
was
morning.
very reluctant to say what I said, but I knew
that's
that
fine.
you could take it.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
It's all right. It happened. We're all just people. That's what I learned this year.
So
we
true.
all have to stay straight.
Yeah, it's the truth. And we need to recognize that in each other as well as
It was my
ourselves.
sister. She's in big troubles, but it's okay. She needed to call, and I'll get back to her.
Oh, good.
What?
I was thinking, so if God owns Israel, all right, and if the Israeli people are going to come and lease it or tent on it, what about the poor Canaanites and all the other people living there that get displaced? And then they're either subjugated or they get displaced to another land, and then there's someone in the other land and it causes all those fights, which is almost antithetical to not in God's name. So it's really unfair so it's really about one society, an agrarian society. But and here it's perfect, but it kind of dismisses those consequences.
It's just another example of the fact that this is a utopian vision, as you say, for a uniform society that is willing to agree on the foundations of it.
Yeah.
And that is why the secular Zionists would have nothing to do with this. They were trying to create a complex society, not just religious people, so to speak.
And then it's hard enough for it to work in an agrarian society, and then in our society, what did they do after 50 years? They shut down General Motors and give everybody stock options?
It's like Pesach.
Yeah.
What do you do with your hummus?
Yes.
You know, and they've developed a fiction. You sell it to somebody else.
You know, our Orthodox neighbors, they
come to you?
No, they don't, but they talked about it. They lock it in the closet and the rabbi sells it for them. And
exactly.
Yeah.
As a fiction. They're not really selling it.
Yeah, right,
They're just saying, maybe they have a written thing, I've sold it to this guy, maybe at the bottom of that thing, and he's obligated to sell it back to me.
Right, that's right.
So it's like the Shabbos Goy, too, you know?
We were that, yes.
So, you know, these are the ways in which an ideal has to acknowledge
reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's very powerful, and I like working within the context.
But
You can see why things maybe didn't work out.
yeah, that's true. And in a certain way, my distinction at the beginning between philosophers who disagree with one
Yes,
another,
yes,
and,
yes, yes.
and now we have something else. Your point is, and I think one of the points that we've moved toward today, is it is just another theory,
Yes,
which has its power like Locke and its flaws like Locke.
yes, but it says you can't have, like Thomas Kuhn, you can't have anything else. You can't have a revolution changing it, and you have to try and incorporate everything in it, but keep a kind of internal consistency and logic within the system.
What does Kuhn say? That there's a point in the development of a theory where anomalies pile up,
That's right.
and that
it
means
doesn't
you
work anymore.
must do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like the epicycles.
Yes,
That
yes.
was a problem.
Yes.
And the epicycles solved the problem for a while, until you had epicycles on epicycles on epicycles.
yes,
Yeah. So in a certain way, what you were suggesting is this is just another
But
theory,
it's lasted for as long as some of the Greek theories.
and it's a powerful one where we see who we are and the nature of
Yes, it
things.
still has relevance. Okay.
See you soon.
How can I communicate with Andrea?
Gee, I don't have her number. Can I find it for you? Do you want to wait a second and I'll come
For sure, for
back
sure.
to okay, very good.
I had Chad's information.
Okay, well, let's see, because I have it on my computer.
I'd like to write.
Good,
Thank
good,
you.
good. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Two very quick things.
Yeah.
Every Friday night after candlelighting, I have a stack of papers with Parsha related essays and commentary and things like that I go through.
Nice.
And last night I hit that Sachs thing, and I had the exact same reaction. I went, wow, and I never got to the rest of the stack. I was like,
Was it Sachs that you had?
yes.
Oh,
And it was
just this.
It was an essay with those same points, almost the exact same words. He also brought in Soloveitchik's lowly man of faith into it as well.
Oh, did he?
And when you tied back to Genesis, he did as well with that point.
With the Soloveitchik.
So the second thing is a multi-million-dollar idea that three of us can invest in. The person who invented monopoly did it to demonstrate that our current economic system will result in all the wealth in one place. Somebody owning Boardwalk and Park Place and all that. So they came up with this game that would turn out, and it was Monopoly. It became Monopoly. There was an alternate rule that showed that a different approach worked. And eventually these single tax guys, Henry George, the guy whose statues in Public Square, Tom Johnson, adopted that and said, this is proof that single tax theory would work, this alternate set of rules. We should write a new game called Jubilee, similar to Monopoly, and see if it works.
And when you write it, bring it to me and I'll give you my imprimatur.
Okay, all right, that's it.
Very good.
Thanks.
All right, you're back to baseball. You back to baseball?
Yeah, I love it. Yes, you're absolutely right about that. It keeps getting wider and wider.
And this is the author of this. His name is Noe, N-O-E. Wrote a book with the title Infinite Baseball, and this is part of his argument against the automatic ball and strike, because his point is that custom has something to do with the application of rules, and he makes the point that the pitcher is in conversation with the umpire, and if the umpire sees that pitcher has pinpoint control, he's likely to widen the strike zone for him because he's deserving it. But the ABS, nope, a ball is a ball and a strike is a strike, and many more walks are taking place, lower batting averages, and so on because of this. I think they're going to probably abandon it or make it.
I don't like that.
I don't like it
I like
either.
that infinite of the game. There are so many elements that.
That's true.
It took away times. I don't like that either.
Oh, that's very good. I like it. Very good. We don't like it.
I happen to be going to Goddard Emerald tonight,
So are we.
so that's why I thought maybe you are.
Oh, good.
Maybe I'll see you.
Yeah,
Do you
you know,
give a lecture?
I've got 2 funerals tomorrow. I had to cancel my tennis game today to accommodate it. My choice was tennis game or Gerda Dameron. But I wanted to see Gerda Dameron. I mean, the tennis thing is, but I can't.
I'll try to see you.
Do you know Gerda Dameron at all? Oh,
I know somebody gave me a ticket.
the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes are
I'll try to stay away.
the top.
So maybe I'll see you
Where are you sitting?
in a box.
Oh, you're in a box. We're upstairs in the dress circle. So the box is self-contained.
Yeah.
You could come upstairs during yeah, and we're going to be right there.
I'll try to do that.
And the Stravinsky Symphony is also great. His first
I
symphony.
heard the cello. No, that was Shostakovich.
Yeah, did you? Yeah.
I came later.
He's waiting. No,
you're waiting.
he's waiting. I'm going to get him on phone number.
Feel very badly about Rabbi Rose.
Oh, thank you so much.
Clearly from last night, she was someone who's very important in your life.
No question. Even though the ending was not as wonderful as it could have been. Yeah. But still,
Life. That's life.
that life happens. It's true, but I can't let that. I won't let it dominate the whole.
Right.
I mean, we had so much fun together. I don't know if I ever told you the story about Rabbi Rosie. When I started in 1993, when I did the first service, Rabbi came and was conducting. She was sitting next to me. When it came time for the Elenu, she gave me the elbow because I didn't know how the service here works. The elbow, it's time to go open the ark. 25 years later, the last service we do together, Rick Block is doing the service, sitting next to me. Comes time for the Elenu, elbow. As if I needed help 25 years later.
Okay.
Yeah, that was her though. Once she got an idea, she stuck with it.
Why don't we open the ark for Elena?
You'll have to ask one of the rabbis.
You are one of the rabbis.
Oh, doggone it, I thought that was going to be the
So
end
when
of
we
it.
do morning minyan on Tuesdays,
Yeah,
sometimes I'm asked to lead Elenu.
Okay.
When I lead Elenu, I go and open the ark.
yeah. You know, it's a good question. I mean, inevitably, customs develop. One of the things that's on
That wasn't
our...
my main point.
What was your main point?
I like Sachs's treatment of freedom and equality, that those are in opposition. And I'm thinking of some of the other known societies of that age and how they wrestled with the freedom and equality. I think that would have been a nice angle for Sachs to go down and
Contemporary societies to the Bible.
yes, but I'm not quite sure there are a lot of great examples, but I'm thinking of Greek society and tyrants that in crisis they would say, you be the ultimate leader, enough with all of this democracy stuff, you just make the decisions. Essentially they were giving up their freedom.
Yeah.
But I don't know how close an analogy that was, but
That's a good
I
point.
really like that juxtaposition. He did a really good job.
Doesn't he, though? But you make a good point. How is that dichotomy? How does it operate in different societies? I mean, after the Peloponnesian Wars, when the tyrants did take charge, and I don't know much about that period, but that was the 30 tyrants, wasn't it? Or maybe that was before.
I have only a vague, having studied that in college, but they basically said, we've got this enemy, and democracy just doesn't move fast enough. We're going to basically give up a whole bunch of our freedoms.
Look, without being overly political about
But
it.
it was time limited, as I understand.
Oh, was it time limited? So the tyrants are elected. That may be right. That's what's happened in our society, isn't it? don't the Republicans, or especially Trump and his minions, feel that the kind of changes they would like to make, let's bracket that out, Congress is too unwieldy and so on, that we're really not able to do the work of the society? No, I mean, that has come to be a problem, hasn't it?
I wish I was convinced that they thought it was a time-delimited release of freedom.
No, that's very true. But don't you
I'm
think...
worried that they feel like, we want to make this a permanent feature.
No, that's for sure. But you just take the immigration. Over the last decades, there have been attempts to get some consensus about it. Bush, W. tried, and Biden, maybe a little bit. So there is a sense of impatience with our regular way of doing things that, in especially the complicated world in which we live, aren't adequate to resolve the problems. Forget the issue of what the resolutions are or are proposed, but there is something really true about that, isn't there?
Yeah, yes, and impatience doesn't make good laws, and the definition of the problem is the important aspect of it. What is the problem? Because in an earlier age, we had, I'll use lowercase l for liberal immigration. People would come into the country, and we didn't have all of these rules and regulations. And if you look back, I'm guessing, a lot of people would find ancestors who, they found their way to Canada, and oops, they ended up in the United States, and there were no formalities of that.
But one of the reasons for that, say in the late 19th century, was that the industrialization engines were working strong, and there was a need for laborers, and therefore the laws became much more accepting.
Yeah.
Now,
going back to the umpire rule, the neighborhood.
the neighborhood, right?
The rules were there, and they were observed in their breach.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the way any good society should work. You've got your pillars, but you've got to have some adjustments to it. I'm so ticked off at that guy who slid into home. But as the author said, he raised the question, why did he slide? Doesn't anybody know that if the bases are loaded, you get the home as fast as possible? And statistically, that event happens on the average of once a month, so that it's not on the mind of either runners or coaches. This is not. He should have known. But it takes a kind of leap to be able to, wait a minute now, this is not, and so on, because it happens so rarely. I agree with you in principle, but in fact,
the emotions of the moment.
That's possible too.
Sort of override.
They would have won. That was the play.
Yeah.
Wow.
One minor point.
Yeah.
You've made this statement before about the dividing of the parsha
Yes.
and the editors of the text.
Yes.
There's probably 1,000 years between those two things, the text by the editors, and then basically the Masoretes decided on how the portions should be divided up.
Was it the Masoretes?
I believe so.
That's 1,000 years later.
Yeah, so you make the point that the text slows down. I don't disagree with that premise, and that's how the editors wanted the flow of the text. But the divisions of how we divide it up per week, maybe let's say the Masoretes who said this is going to be the portion, this is going to be the double portion, and so on. Maybe they understood what the editors were trying to accomplish, and they divided up the parsha with that understanding in mind, and also sort of slowed down the text.
You're not saying now the division into parshas, but the dividing of the
into parshas.
Into parshas.
So most years we have 50-some parshiotes, and then on the leap years we get an extra few, and we divide up those. that division, of which happens in sequence,
Yes.
was much later than when the text was finalized, the editors.
And you know that, you say that because you know that it was the Masoretes who did
I
this?
don't know that it was the Masoretes.
But
It
later,
was much later, after the book came to its final form.
yes,
There, the weekly reading and how we divide up the parsha was a much later imposition over. I think it approached the modern period when we actually divided up
Wow.
into chapters, verses, and the
that's
parshas.
for sure. I mean, but let's distinguish between
Yeah, the
chapters,
parsha. Yeah.
because that has probably to do with the disputations,
Yes.
where they had to have a common text.
I'll look it up, but I believe that the final form of the 5 books, there was a huge period of time, and later it was the division into the weekly parshiot.
Good. This is a kind of what we call the lower criticism of the text. The higher criticism is its history, its meaning, and so on. You're talking about how the text, what's the history of the text and aspects of the text itself. I have a really great book on that subject.
It all goes back to, there aren't really divisions in the text other than between the books. You see, big spaces.
Oh, no question, no question.
And no punctuation.
No, that's true. I will, if I remember, I will look into it, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. All right. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, my.
Oh, good. It's good that she called me when she's alive. You said personal. Yesterday she did. She called me. Today she. I think my mushroom mutually. Check for the 22nd. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm trying to. I haven't built a bed yet.
That's Saturday, it's
My
Friday.
life is at the top of my list. I'm trying to. The 22nd is Friday. Hold on. But I talked to Eddie yesterday. We have to.
Wednesday before. You don't have, but I will, I mean, I will be there. Well, because I
And
didn't
so
know.
I said, so sometimes I feel like I should just go there and do it. She said,
Okay.
Mom, you can't get on the floor. It's dry carpet. So
All right.
that's done.
Goodbye.
Take care.
See you in 2 weeks.
I'll see you in 2 weeks, I guess.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna be?
Arizona.
Oh, good for
She's
you.
going for graduation.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. They got done with the
That's
class.
a tough on your 4-pointer.
Yeah, yeah. We have another one in 3 weeks. We have 2 in 3 weeks. How are you, Matt?
They better not be the same time.
How are you,
When
Matt?
was it? When was the college graduation? This is high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's,
fun.
I'm proud of the fact that I
Goodbye.
keep your grandchildren. That I keep track of your grandchildren. Who's where and
You
what.
don't need to.
Do you know what I mean? It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that.
I gotta go to the, I'm gonna go get my glasses adjusted.
Where? At Park?
Yeah.
You go to Park?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just telling.
Do you know the person who owns it?
Yes, I do.
What's her name?
Kathy.
It's her mother that I know.
Yeah, it's Kathy.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to get my
And I
glasses.
ran into her the last time I was there, and they straightened him out. I got up from my chair and I stepped on him, and she actually, I didn't break them, but they were all bent out of shape and cockeyed, so I stopped in, and she straightened them out for me perfectly. Kathy did it, but I talked to her mother. She plays Maj.
I know, that was she did too. Gotta get the glasses fixed, otherwise I'll keep
I
having
know,
this.
she gets new ones, because every time the doctor gives me a prescription, it's just a twitch off and beginning to be a twitch too much.
I thought you just got new glasses.
She's 3 years old. I've had them for 3 years, yeah. But I like them.